Well, we're interrupting our regular programming now to cross live to Sochi, where Vladimir Putin and Recep Tayyip Erdogan of Turkey are just starting to speak. Let's listen in.
Успешно развиваются по всем направлениям. Сегодняшние переговоры, как всегда, прошли в конструктивной и деловой атмосфере. Мы подробно рассмотрели все ключевые вопросы российско-турецкого взаимодействия в области безопасности, в экономике, политике, культурно-гуманитарной сфере. Обменяясь мнениями по актуальным темам международной и региональной повестки.
On our regional and international agendas. In terms of our bilateral economic ties, we were satisfied to see that we have increasing trade, and since it has increased by over 80% since last year, and for many billions of dollars. And in the first half of this year, it grew by another 4%. And we see that there's a very active trend of the use of the ruble and the lira in trade, and the dollar and the euro consequently have been less used. Our central banks are working hard on developing correspondence networks for the credit systems of both countries. So our cooperation is also strategic in energy. The Akuya NPP will soon begin to work, and it has 4 units with over 400 megawatts. And many of our experts, nuclear experts, engineers are working day and night in order for the first unit to begin in the year 2024. In April of this year, at Akaya, there was for the first time some nuclear fuel, and it then received the status of a nuclear facility. So now Turkey has joined the club of those using peaceful nuclear power. We also work in the gas sector together, and we have provided 20.5 billion cubic meters. And we will be increasing this. And I want to say that Russia has always been and will continue to be a reliable and responsible partner, and we want to help Turkey continue to provide it with very environmentally friendly fuel. And we are also going to develop relations so that Turkey becomes a transit country for fuel going further on. And for that purpose, we will create a gas hub in Turkey. Gazprom has given Bataj, a Turkish company, a roadmap for this, and a work group has been set up for the framework of the functioning of this hub, and also to have a trading platform set up. We have a good pace in operations for cooperation in agriculture. We have increased our food exports to many billions, and this will continue to grow in between January and July. It will increase further, and we've had over 5 million Russians visiting Turkey as tourists, and we know this will continue to grow. And we consider that this trend will continue in the future, and our key agencies will continue to work with Turkey in order to ensure that when Russians go to Turkey, they will be safe and comfortable. Our Turkish friends are doing everything in their power to ensure this. Russia has always, in a friendly way, tried to help Turkey when it suffers from natural disasters of all kinds. After the February destructive earthquakes, our country sent
Столь же
teams,
оперативно мы откликнулись и на
search
запрос
and
о
rescue
предоставлении
teams,
российских
and also
самолетов-амфибий
we
Б-200
have
для
provided the
ликвидации лесных
amphibian
пожаров на Эгейском побережье.
planes
И, конечно,
to
большое
extinguish
внимание в ходе
fires.
переговоров
And
мы
during
уделили
our
актуальным международным
negotiations,
темам.
we have talked
В
about
частности,
international
ситуацию вокруг
issues,
Украины.
the situation
Естественно, шла речь и о
around Ukraine,
прекращении
and of
с
course we
18
spoke
июля так
of
называемой Черноморской
the
инициативы по вывозу
end of the
зерна из
functioning of the
украинских
grain
портов.
deal,
Господин президент
of grain
уделил этому значительное внимание. Как уже
exiting
не раз
Ukrainian
говорил, нас
ports.
просто вынудили
Turkish
принять
president
это решение. Я
spoke
имею в
of
виду
this many
Россию,
times, but
так как
Russia had
западные
to
страны
pull out of it
блокировали и
because
продолжают
Western
блокировать
countries
выполнение
were
зерновых
blocking
сделки в
many
части
things,
обеспечения доступа российских
including
сельхозпроизводителей на мировые рынки.
Russian agricultural companies any access to external markets, and our food and fertilizer was not being accepted as export. There were issues with chartering ships and insurance, as well as logistics issues. And while Russia was providing guarantees of security for the navigating, the other side used this humanitarian corridor for terrorist attacks against civilian Russian structures. This had to be responded to. So we also want to point out that the fact that Russia pulled out did not have a massive impact on the supply of food. And we see the price of grain continues to fall, and there are no massive shortages, but there is a problem with food distribution. But this is in no way related to the grain deal, and we don't see anything surprising in this. Why? Because Ukraine's share in the grain market is 5% and remains 5%, and in the future will probably be reduced. The West has tried to pull the wool over our eyes in terms of supposedly helping developing countries, because with all of the grain pulled out, I want to say that over 70%, I emphasize 70% of that grain went to developed countries, namely EU countries, whereas those countries really needing food assistance only received 3%. That is less than 1 million tons, and I once again want to reiterate our position. We can resuscitate this grain deal, and I have said this to the Turkish president, and we will do this as soon as all the agreements will be fulfilled in terms of eliminating all restrictions on Russian agricultural export. And Russia continues to and will continue to export its food and fertilizer to improve the food situation through the world. And it will organize a shipping of 1 million tons of grain out of Russia on a preferential rate to Turkey, to be then redirected to the poorest countries. And we are relying on Qatar's support in order to ensure that we can support the poorest countries. We are close to finalizing an agreement with 6 African countries where we plan to send this food assistance free of charge, and also the shipping and logistics would be free of charge. The negotiations have almost been finalized, I would say, in the next few weeks. During the negotiations, we also talked about the settlement of the Syrian question, and we cherish our cooperation with Turkey in this. And on the Astaline format, we think this is the best format for negotiations, and it's important that we have basic approaches that we agree on the Syrian issue, that is, respecting sovereignty and territorial integrity of the country. And we know that a great deal of reconstruction has to take place, but you need national reconciliation first, and the Syrians themselves must define their own future. without
При
others
обмене мнениями
interfering.
по ситуации в Ливии
Now, with regard to
подтверждена
Libya,
приверженность к
we
комплексному урегулированию
confirmed
многолетнего кризиса в
a
этой стране на основе
complex
переговоров и
situation
поиска
based on
компромиссов, избегая вспышек насилия и не
compromises
допуская
to
распада
avoid
ливийского государства.
an upsurge
В
of
целом,
violence.
считаю,
And
что
on the whole,
состоявшаяся сверка часов по упомянутым
I
и
think
другим
that
региональным
in all
сюжетам
these
была
regional
весьма
issues,
полезной.
our
И в
discussions
заключение
were
хотел бы
very, very
еще раз
useful,
выразить
and I would like in
признательность
conclusion to
президенту
express my
Турции
gratitude
господину
to the
Эрдогану
President
за
of
совместную
Turkey,
работу,
Mr.
за содержательный и
Erdogan, for
продуктивный
the
диалог.
productive
Без сомнения,
dialogue and
сегодняшние переговоры
fruitful work.
послужат дальнейшему
And I am
развитию
sure that these
российско-турецкого
negotiations
партнерства
will further
во всех
develop our
областях. Благодарю вас.
relations in all spheres. Thank you.
Спасибо.
Thank you.
Sayın Devlet Başkanı, saygıdeğer heyet üyeleri, kıymetli basın mensupları, sizlere en kalbi
Members of
duygularımla,
delegations,
saygıyla
journalists.
selamlıyorum.
My most
Kıymetli
heartfelt
dostum,
welcomes and
Sayın
respect to all of
Putin'e
you.
nazik daveti ve misafirperverliği için
I would like to thank
tekrar
my dear friend
teşekkür ediyorum.
Vladimir Putin for inviting me
Yine bu
here and for
vesileyle
showing his
6
great
Şubat
hospitality once again.
depremleriyle son aylarda yaşanan
I would
orman
like to take
yangınları
this
sırasında
opportunity
verdikleri
to
destek
remind
ve
everyone
sergiledikleri
of a few
dayanışma
points, in
için
particular the
şahsım
essential
milletim
aid
adına
that we have provided
teşekkür ediyorum.
Russia
Kendisiyle
and
son
the
olarak
aid that
geçtiğimiz
Russia has
yıl
provided us
Astana'da
in light of
düzenlenen
the most recent
Asya'da
earthquakes
İşbirliği
and
ve
the
Güven
bushfires.
Artırıcı Önlemler Konferansı vesilesiyle
Also in light of
bir araya
Astana and
gelmiştik.
the Conference on
O
Asia
günden bugüne
for
kadar
the
Sayın
establishment
Putin'le
of
daima
economic trust.
yakın
Since
telefon
that meeting was held,
diplomasisiyle
we
diyalog
have
içinde olduk.
continued to hold
Bugün gerek ikili
regular
gerekse
phone
heyetlerimizin
conversations and phone
katılımıyla
contact
yaptığımız görüşmelerde
between Vladimir Putin and myself. We
gündemimizdeki
met
konuları
today in person,
ele aldık.
but we have also
Ticaret,
met with our
enerji,
various
tarım,
delegations.
turizm, ekonomi,
We spoke of trade,
finans
energy,
başta
agriculture,
olmak üzere
tourism, the
çok
economy,
boyutlu
finance in
işbirliğimizi
particular.
daha da güçlendirmek için
We spoke also
atılabilecek
of
adımları
relations between our nations in many domains.
ikili ticaret hacmimiz
And we spoke also
geçen
of
sene
everything that we can
yaklaşık
continue to do in
69
the
milyar
future.
dolara ulaştı. 100 milyar dolar olarak
We had
belirlediğimiz
roughly
hedefe emin
$69
adımlarla
billion
ilerliyoruz.
in trade between our two
Turizmde
nations. We
bu
want to
yılda
reach a yearly
oldukça
target
başarılı
of
bir sezon
100 billion.
geçiriyoruz.
And we will hopefully reach that in the very near future. So our relations are quite well. In 2022,
Rus
there were
vatandaşını
5
ülkemizde ağırlamıştık.
million, more than
Bu yılın
5
ilk
million
yedi
Russian
ayında
citizens
ise
who came to spend their
3,5
holidays
milyon
in Turkey.
Rus turist
And in
ülkemize
2023,
geldi.
in the first 7 months of the year, 7.3 million Russian tourists have already come to Turkey, and this figure is continuing to rise and will continue to do so through to the end of the year.
Karadeniz girişiminin yeniden canlandırılması oldu.
We insisted in our negotiations on a number of points
Ofis açma
so that
kararından
a number of items
Karadeniz girişimi
can come back to the fore.
küresel gıda kriziyle
Also, for example, we spoke of the bureau in the northern Cypriot regions, and we also want Russia
en çok ihtiyaç duyanlar için
to step in on a number of points, in particular when it comes to grain deliveries to Russia, to Africa.
güvenli
A number of alternatives were discussed. There was the initiative for the Black Sea. This is one that we spoke of at great length. We spoke of our various positions, and we want to come up with a long-term solution.
tüm tarafların
There are a number of expectations coming from the Russian side, where Turkey is aware of those
biz de
expectations.
farklı vesilelerle ifade ettik,
And
ediyoruz.
our Russian counterparts raised a number of points
Girişimin
during the
devam
negotiations.
ettirilmesi gerektiğine
We need to
bu konudaki
cover
görüşlerimizi
any gaps
değerli dostumla da
and shortfall that we have
ikili
so that we can get
görüşmemizde
these
Bu kapsamda
basic staples to the people who need them.
Milletler'le bir istişare
And these were
önemli
all comments
ilerlemeleri
that
içeren
we shared when we had our one-on-one
paketi
meeting.
hazırladık.
In terms of the United
Bu yeni süreç
Nations, we need to see
vasıtasıyla
new
netice almanın
initiatives
mümkün olduğu
coming to the
kanaatindeyim.
fore. There needs to be a new process
Türkiye
put
olarak
in place, and I think with that we will be able to come to a speedy
İnşallah
outcome.
kısa sürede ulaşacağımıza inanıyorum. Değerli basın mensupları,
While waiting for that, we need to have a short-term solution that fulfills everyone's expectations and needs. So to the members of the press here today, I would like to reiterate that There is a great sense of stability in our region. We are doing everything in our power to ensure that stability will remain. And we need to come about a solution for sustainable long-term peace. In times of war, no one wins. Everyone wants peace because through peace everyone will win. So therefore we need to have direct meetings in the very near future with all parties. We are willing to take part in similar initiatives that have been taken in the past for negotiations. But during our discussions with Mr. Putin, we spoke of other issues about Syria, Namibia, other issues in the African continent. But thanks to our genuine long-term relations as neighboring countries, we feel that we need to continue these relations in the future because it is in our interest, our shared interest, but also in the region's interest. Turkish-Russian relations are positive, are on solid ground. And we are continuing our long-term ongoing discussions with Russia to ensure that those relations will stay strong into the future. We also spoke of the nuclear facility, Baku, in Turkey. Work is continuing, satisfactorily so. There's also discussion of the Sinop facility, again in Turkey. And other steps forward are going to be made in the near future, thanks to which Turkey will be able to make a huge shift in terms of its own energy provision. I would like to thank once again Vladimir Putin for his kind show of hospitality, having us here for these discussions, and I certainly hope that the sound relations that we showed today will continue in the future.
Now, Russian journalists and Turkish as well.
Anadolu Ajansı Ali Cura. Sayın sorum hem Sayın Erdoğan'a.
This is from the Anatol press outfit. We have a question for both presidents. For there to be an end brought to the conflict between Russia and Turkey, Mr. Erdogan, we see that you are doing a lot. There is much that you are doing in diplomatic terms to bring this conflict to an end, for there is ceasefire to be brought forward. So what are you going to continue doing?
Rегиона считаете вы, что она должна быть продолжена? That in this region the grain deal should be continued? With respect to the efforts of President Erdogan to settle the crisis in Ukraine, he has always paid a great deal of attention to this and continues to do so, including when we speak one-on-one. And Turkey's mediation facilitated the agreement reached between the Russian and Ukrainian delegation. But subsequently, Ukraine then sent them to the dumpster. Nobody's talked about that. We're hearing about new initiatives. Well, it's not what was discussed before. That's not what, there's nothing new being accepted. Now, in terms of their intermediary services, we've never refused them, and we have always welcomed initiatives also from the Chinese government, from African countries, but we, of course, are grateful to the Turkish president's efforts in this area. Now, with regard to renewing the grain deal, I've already said this. I don't think I can add anything. We initially agreed to participate in this, including because we had coordinated, again, through the intermediary assistance of the Turkish president and with the United Nations. We promised to carry out. We also obtained a promise for some obligations for the Russian side. But once we attained this deal, none of the obligations for Russia were fulfilled. We were asked to continue participating without having these obligations fulfilled. We then were asked to extend the deal. We did. And a third time we were asked to extend or renew our partnership, and we ask that the obligations for us be fulfilled. And as usual, often this is the case with our Western partners. They, again, pulled wool over our eyes. So that's it. We said, we are not against this deal. We can return immediately to this deal as soon as the promises made to us will have been fulfilled. Today, they're all fulfilled. In the next few days, we will fully resume our participation in this deal. What else can I add? If only to say we always agreed that these corridors for humanitarian assistance should not be used for military purposes, but they are being used by the other side. And there are also attempts being made with regard to the Turkish flow and the flow of natural gas. Our ships are protecting these pipelines, but they're always under attack, and including with drones from Ukrainian ports. So we have to agree about everything, that none of that will happen in the future. And in that case, Russia will also fulfill its promises. We have no problems in that regard, none at all. We are going to have a good, bountiful harvest this year. Last year, it was 150,000 tons, and I think this year it'll be about 130. And I think, yes, we have a very good harvest. So the export potential is enormous. We have Turkey as a major partner, and they will be processing grain, so they will be able to cover their needs in grain. And together we can work going forward, as Mr. President has said, and we're ready to return to this Black Sea Initiative, and together with Turkey and Qatar, help the poorest countries. I think there are about 50 million. Up to 6 African countries, we're ready to provide to each of them 50,000 tons. It's just in the next days to come. We are ready to work and will continue to work in all these areas.
Evet, Sayın Başkan'ın da ifade ettiği gibi özellikle
As President Putin just said,
burada Rusya ile müşterek adımların atılabilmesi
for
noktasında
Ukraine, we need to see positive joint steps made by both Russia and Ukraine. We need both sides to show more flexibility so the humanitarian grain corridor can be opened through the Black Sea so that the least developed countries can receive that grain, especially in Africa. Grain needs to reach these countries. 44% of the grain is currently being sent to Europe. And Russia doesn't agree with this. 14% comes through to Turkey, and roughly 6%
ister istemez
of
Rusya'yı
grain that
da
reaches
fakir
the African
ülkelere
continent
bunu göndermek istiyoruz.
is all they're getting. So what Russia is trying to say is that they want to see this grain properly reaching African soil.
Bu tahılı göndermeye varız.
We spoke
Bunun bütün
about
lojistik çalışmalarını da
1 million tons of grain being sent directly to Africa, and we're going to do everything that we can,
biz de kendilerine
logistically speaking, to make sure this actually happens.
Türkiye olarak biz de buna varız.
And we said that we are willing and ready to do everything that needs to be done to make this happen. We're going to do everything for this grain to maybe be transferred through Turkish processing facilities and mills so that the end product can then reach Africa. If that's the way to act as a middleman in this situation, then so be it, and this is a situation that, or solution that we're looking into. Vladimir Putin made a key mention of 6 countries in Africa that desperately need this grain, so we hope that this solution can be brought through in a speedy fashion.
Агентство «Интерфакс», здравствуйте. У меня будет 2 вопроса.
I will have 2 questions. One to both. It's a clarifying question to both presidents. You have talked about Qatar's participation in this export. Can this be a full or partial replacement of the grain deal? And the second question for Mr. Putin. Mr. President, many sources talk about some kind of, let's say, breakage or a slowing of the offensive by Ukraine. And in that regard, do you think that there could be perhaps room for some kind of negotiations with Russia? Answer. With regard to grain, we don't see our work with Turkey and Qatar of this 1 million tons of grain. This is not an alternative. We know that Ukraine has its own grain. This is not a replacement, a substitute. But for us, of course, it would be, that is, for us, a massive contribution to resolving the food crises in African countries. Now, with respect to the fact that this is, it's not that it's slowing down. This counteroffensive is not slowing down. It's a failure. And, well, it's probably just going to continue that way. So I want to say that Russia has never refused to engage in any negotiations and does not do so now. And the Turkish president broached this, and I confirm that this is the case.
Evet, yani Katar'ın özellikle bu fakir en az gelişmiş
Indeed,
Afrika ülkelerine
Qatar,
tahılın
compared in relation to the least developed countries, and to speak to the fact that the grain needs to be first processed and turned into flour before sent to these countries, well, Qatar and Russia and Turkey, we have formed a trio. Well, we and Russia, we're looking to form a trio. We hope Qatar will be part of that trio so that we can send this grain or the grain byproduct to those people who need it. Thank you very much.
You're listening live there to President Erdogan and President Putin speaking about a range of issues, including, crucially, the Ukraine grain deal, which Russia pulled out of in July of this year, impacting global food supply. Putin there defending his decision to exit that deal, but then went on to say that the grain agreement can be resuscitated if what he describes as restrictions on Russian exports to different countries are lifted. Well, Well, listening to that with me was Oliver Farry from our Foreign Affairs desk. And Oliver, first of all, crucially, the question here is, does it sound to you like this Ukraine grain deal is going to be revived now?
Not immediately. It's Vladimir Putin is very much cleaving to the same line he has up until now. They want the restrictions lifted. Vladimir Putin is also in no rush to get things back to where they were. He himself said that grain prices continue to fall. Russia pulling out of the grain deal 6 weeks ago has not had a major, massive impact on the grain trade. He does, however, say that distribution is the problem. And this is something that he plays quite well in developing countries. It's a way that Russia can more or less paint the West as the villain here, the people who are obstructing grain from getting to developing countries. He said that 70% of the grain is going to developing countries, only 3% to underdeveloped ones. Now, that's not entirely true because in many cases, the stuff that is going to Western countries is actually going to institutions who then sell it on to developing countries. But he knows exactly that he will have an audience for this in countries. In countries in the global south. He's also said that there will be 6 African states where 1 million tons of grains will be sent to in the coming days. This is brokered by both Turkey and Qatar. So this, he said himself, it's not an alternative to the grain deal. He's obviously trying to show that he's being very calm and rational on this, but it's certainly a stopgap, and it's something that will play well for Russia among countries that are genuinely worried about their grain supplies for the coming months.
And I'm interested, Oliver, in what you made of the language of Putin and Erdogan more broadly. You know, they talked not just about Ukraine, they also talked about Syria, about Libya, and they talked about trade as well. They talked about tourism and sort of, apparently rather cordial relations between the two countries, a sort of strengthening alliance, perhaps. I wonder if you agree with that, and I wonder what you think the Western reaction to that might be.
Well, Turkey and Russia have certainly been going in this direction for several years now, and Recep Tayyip Erdogan has more or less had a fairly independent line on Russia, despite Turkey being a NATO member. This will be greeted with a little bit of dismay in Western capitals. I think most of Turkey's fellow NATO members will not be particularly happy with it. But Erdogan will say himself that he is merely emphasizing trade, the sort of things that Western countries actually do hold dearly. They're targeting for $100 billion of trade per year between Moscow and Ankara. And also he said that 5 million Russian tourists visited Turkey last year. Turkey is already a very big popular destination for Russian tourists, but now it's already 7.3 million this year. That has a lot to do with the fact that Turkey is one of the few countries they can get into in west of Russia where they actually don't need a visa. So it's very much set up for them. Recep Tayyip Erdogan as well is also saying, he also mentioned briefly talks in Ukraine, said that in times of war, no one wins. And he's calling on Russia and Ukraine to sit down and more or less hash things out. This is not going to be met with any reception whatsoever in Kyiv. Vladimir Zelensky's government and will say that, well, Russia and Vladimir Putin cannot be trusted, and that they will do nothing even to fulfill preconditions for these particular talks to take place. But Erdogan is casting himself, like Putin, on his side of being a calm, rational middleman. And he's probably emboldened by the fact that, against many expectations, he got re-elected fairly comfortably in May. A lot of people had written him off. In fact, weakened particularly after the earthquake earlier this year. And it is widely speculated that Turkey cut off the sort of grey trade that was passing through the country mainly from China, but also from other countries such as India towards Russia, largely under pressure from the United States in return for aid after that earthquake. So this is something that Recep Tayyip Erdogan a few months ago, you probably wouldn't have expected him to veer a little bit in this direction, but he's doing something now that he obviously feels quite comfortable with. His NATO allies will not be so happy with, but it doesn't necessarily mean that he is actually stepping out of line per se either.
And just a brief final thought, Oliver, if I can. Putin there at the end of the press conference saying that the Ukraine counteroffensive isn't going very well. I know that the message in Kyiv this week it would be rather different.
Yeah, both sides are obviously going to paint a better picture of it than they are. What we do know is that Ukraine is making some advances. It's not making any particularly hugely substantial ones, and it's probably going to take a long time more yet. There'll be a lot more entrenched battle and warfare to come. It's certainly going better for Ukraine at the moment, but there's really no end in sight of the war this year at least, whatever about next year.
All right, Oliver Farry, thanks very much.